Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second of our HipFest at Home presentations for 2024. Thank you for joining us. My name is Alison Strauss, and I'm the director of the Hippodrome Silent Film Festival and the programmer of the Hippodrome year-round. As is customary, we'll just start off with a bit of housekeeping before we get properly underway. So subtitles are available by clicking the CC icon in the YouTube video player. And if you're joining this presentation for the online premiere, you can submit questions or comments in the chat box. Our speakers, Shona and Sarah, have kindly agreed to watch along as this talk goes live. So we'll endeavour to respond to any messages then in the chat throughout the presentation. So keep your eye on the comments. Now down to business. I'm very much enjoying being in the virtual realm with you all as the excitement builds for our in-person events next month. It's been all I could do to keep details under my hat of our opening night screening with New Music Commission for all this time, but now our 2024 programme has been announced to the world, and we can tell everyone the exciting news that we will be presenting Jenny Gilbertson's beautiful lyrical story documentary, The Rugged Island, a Shetland Lyric, with live music accompaniment by Shetland musicians Inga Thompson and Katrina MacDonald as our prestigious first night event. Like all the other presentations in our HipFest at Home series, this online talk is designed to complement the festival programme and spark your enthusiasm for what's to come. So clearly, we hope you will indeed be able to make it along to Bowness for the premiere on the 20th of March. Excitingly, the opening night will be live streamed, so if you can't join us in person for any reason, you can still tune in from anywhere in the world. Several titles made by the pioneering Scottish filmmaker Jenny Gilbertson are preserved in the National Library of Scotland's Moving Image Archive, and anyone who's been to HipFest over the years will have had the chance to see on the Hippodrome big screen some of Gilbertson's arresting films featuring life in Shetland. Now in 2024, we're thrilled to finally be able to share with HipFest audiences Jenny's feature work, The Rugged Island, and who better to tell us more about this exceptional film and the exceptional woman who made it than Dr. Shona Main and Professor Sarah Neely. Shona Main is a writer, filmmaker, and self-declared kinmaker. She started filming her community in 2012 and made her first film, Clavel, about the crofter James Robert Sinclair. This stirred in her an interest in the work of Jenny Gilbertson that resulted in her doctoral research into Gilbertson's filmmaking approach. Shona lives in Shetland and is chair of the Bigton Collective that runs Heimhuis, an arts and wellbeing hub based in the former Kirk. Sarah Neely is a writer, producer and researcher working primarily in the areas of artist moving image and film archives. She is a professor in film and visual culture at the University of Glasgow. She has written widely on the work of women filmmakers in Scotland in the 20th century, including Orcadian filmmaker and poet Margaret Tate, and of course, Jenny Gilbertson. It gives me great pleasure to hand over to our two speakers, Dr. Shona Main and Professor Sarah Neely.
Great. Thanks very much, Ali. I'm delighted to be here, and especially with Shona. We both shared kind of passion for Jenny Gilbertson's films for a long time. I should probably say that I supervised Shona's PhD on Jenny Gilbertson as well. So we've had a lot of conversations. We haven't been able to see each other for a while. So it's very exciting to get to spend some time discussing this topic.
Hi, everybody, and hello, Sarah. It's great to be here. It's great to see Jenny Gilbertson being given a place at, the first opening night of the Hit Fest. And for her work to be kind of revisited with Inga and Katrina MacDonald. So it's really good to see this happening. And as Sarah mentioned, she was my supervisor, my super supervisor for my PhD. So we've had lots of conversations with Jenny Gilbertson. This is the first time we've ever done one publicly, though. So
Yeah, interesting. But we
Excellent.
both rewatched the film as well. So although we haven't, we're excited to see the new score, and um, that will be wonderful to see. We both rewatched the film recently, so we'll be talking about that during this session, as well as a bit about Jenny Gilbertson's life in general, uh, her how she came to write or came to produce her films, and the production of Rugged Island, the reception of Rugged Island, and also her legacy today. And Shona's done a lot of work with Jenny Gilbertson's archive as well. So it'll be interesting to and talk about some of those things as well. But Shona, I wonder if we should start with just her background and what brought her to filmmaking in the first place.
Well, she was brought up in Glasgow. The daughter of a iron and steel merchant. So she was merchant family, middle class. Um, went to good school. Went to Glasgow University. She was one of um students the same year as Ruby Grierson, who was John Grierson, or quite often called the father of documentary. His sister, who also became a filmmaker. They seem to have been friends.
I was going to ask you that. I haven't come
I've
across
never,
that.
never come across any references to Ruby. Certainly to Maya and Grierson, who she befriended later, but not to Ruby. But they were certainly in the same. They were in the same place at the same time, which is quite interesting. So she studied for an MA at Glasgow University, and then she went and studied and trained to be a teacher at Jordan Hill. Yeah. She was she was although she was from a middle class family, there was some money in the family. There was an expectation, I believe, that she was going to just stay at home and look after her mum. There wasn't really there wasn't any wild ambitions for her, but I think she was very independently minded from a very young age. Certainly, when she in her autobiographical writings that are in the archive, the Shetland archive, she talks about the struggles that she had with her mum, um, her mother rather, and so she had ideas that she wanted to go and do things, go places. She went to America for a year and nannied for a year in Boston. But then her uncle died and left her a small amount of money. And that really money at that time for young women allowed them an independence. I mean, when I left home, I could just leave home, get a job, go to university. You know, I wasn't relying on my parents to pay for me, but she got this money. She was able to go, and she went to London, did a secretarial course, and she also um did a little bit of a kind of course on journalism at the same time. So she had a kind of ideas. And I think it was through that journalism course that she met a friend called Ralph, who introduced her to a camera and showed her some footage about what you could do with a camera. And I think she was just really taken with it. I mean, she was kind of not really wanting to be a teacher that much. Um, she wanted to certainly have the life of a teacher in terms of working only in school terms. Um, but this was
She eventually was a teacher.
she was, yeah, she was a
Yeah.
teacher. But she
Yeah.
was already planning on how she could manage being a teacher before she even entered the profession. So this gave her an idea that she could actually make films and she could use them to teach. She could use that as a form of I mean, that was actually quite a popular thing in the early 30s.
Yes. Yeah, I came across, it might be good to talk about how to find out about Jenny Gilbertson, but I came across um, an article in the Orkney Herald from when her films had been shown here. And she talked a little bit about her biography and, her motivation for making films. And she did say that it was education, that that was a motivator to use it as an educational tool. But then when she began showing the film, she realized that other people were interested too. Um, and I think it's interesting how she's presented I mean, one of the sources I've used for finding out more about Jenny Gilbertson and the writing I did on Jenny Gilbertson was in relation to other Scottish women filmmakers. So early filmmakers like Margaret Tate and Ruby Grierson and Marion Grierson. as well as the botanist Isabella Wiley Hutchison. Um, and often their work, because they've been kind of overlooked at certain points, their work isn't always kind of preserved or collected as a whole kind of archive. And I know Jenny Gilbertson, wasn't it the rugged island was found in a shed,
It was a
principally
hen house.
in the 1970s. So, and that was when they were making a film on Gilbertson, but that's when the Scottish Screen Archive took them in. So it's quite interesting. And I guess a lot of, it can be quite difficult to find out
Mm,
and to identify relevant resources for information. And you talked about some of the biographical materials
mm.
that are in
I
the
certainly,
Shetland archive.
the Shetland Archive was a place when I kind of moved in. But we have the preservation of we have Janet McBain, who founded the Scottish Screen Archive, who pursued Gilbert, and you can actually see her letters in the Shetland Archive. She pursued Gilbertson relentlessly, trying to pin her down, trying to get hold of these cans of film. So um this work is preserved because of one person's commitment and interest. And it's really remarkable. I mean, actually, there's another filmmaker in Shetland, Elizabeth Balneves, and her films have not been preserved. There's one film that you can access, but her films have not been preserved. It's the interest of people like yourself that makes these things become found and gathered, preserved, looked after, written about, spoken about.
But I guess we should say, and one of our great heroes of the research on Jenny Gilbertson is Barbara Evans, because she wrote the entry for the Women Film Pioneers project, which for me, and that was before the two of us had met, that for me, that was a key source for information on, and the Film Pioneers project is worth a look for probably a number of the filmmakers that are presented by the Hippodrome Silent Film Festival. Um, but it's a great resource because it provides you biographical information, but also information on where the films are held, where archival materials are held. And I know that was a key resource for you as well.
She was the first person who I read when I read about Jenny Gilbertson. And she's been the person I've kind of gone back to a few times as well.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, I think it it is quite interesting, the pulling together of sources in order. So yeah, I've looked at newspaper articles. Sometimes they're quite interesting reviews of the time. Um, and but also there are materials you've found, sound recordings of Gilbertson's that she did. I mean, sadly, this the Rugged Island was made during a period that was part of the transition of silent to sound cinema, and um, sadly, she didn't have kind of the ability to do field recordings and to do live recordings at the time for the Rugged Island, because I think it would have been incredible. Um, but you have had access to some of her field recordings that she made when she filmed later in life in the Canadian Arctic.
Mm.
So that's another source at the Shetland Archive.
Yeah, that was the 1970s when she went to the Arctic, from 70 to 78. So she has a huge amount of recordings that are now being digitized and preserved by the Shetland Archive. So we have those voices, the voices of the Inuit.
Yeah.
And her talking to them and conversation and them working machinery and firing guns. And so we have all her. It's also an insight into the way that she filmed and the way that she engaged with the people that she was filming. So they're fascinating recordings. I mean, I have to say, and I don't know if you've ever, I have seen, there's two versions of Rugged Island. There's the silent version, and then there's a version with the Kenneth Leslie, Kenneth Leslie Smith,
Yeah.
his soundtrack. So there's two versions. Um, I have seen both, but I really love the silent version because even though we don't hear their voices, there's just it's like a very, very rich experience watching it and listening to in your mind what
Yeah.
you're seeing. So it'll be so interesting to see how that plays out with the new score.
Yeah, I think it would be. So I was involved in a project on silent cinema and the transition to sound with um, Lorraine Porter at De Montfort University and Jeff Brown and John Izod at Stirling University. And our focus was on, for John Izod and I, our focus was on that period in relation to Scotland. And I kind of revisited Jenny Gilbertson's work in that context because of that film and ended up showing it at the British Silent Film Festival in De Montfort um, when we were showcasing kind of early sound films. But we ended up showing the film as silent with uh, live accompaniment from Neil Brand as part of that. And um, yeah, both versions are really interesting. It was quite common of that period to have because it was made during a period of transition. So you would have films that you would have a silent version and a sound version. So Alfred Hitchcock's Blackmail, which is noted as the first British talkie that had a silent version as well as a sound version. I think I think the soundtrack, and I don't know what you think, Shona, about the history of that, because you've talked to the family as well about, um, what Jenny Gilbertson's intentions were, because I think when Scottish Screen Archive got a hold of the prints that were in the hen house, they discovered, and there were nitrate prints as well. So that's probably why they were in the hen house. But they discovered that there was a silent version as well as the sound version. And it was the sound version that had been widely exhibited. And what they kind of ascertained was that um, Jenny Gilbertson had made, and I came across a note, I think think it was in the Scottish Screen Archive in the papers that they held, where she writes about um, editing the film on a 35 millimeter hand crank projector in a church with no electricity and doing a rough edit. And so that would have been the kind of earlier silent version. And then it was shown to distributors in London, and then it was picked up by Zenny Films, and they then added the soundtrack. Um, it sounds very, um, yeah. I wonder what Jenny Gilbertson's. I guess that's what I'm curious about is
Mhm.
what her input into that process would have been.
I think her input um, is that she paid for the score, which was £100.
Um,
Which actually, I have you see it the other week, I put £100 into how much is that in terms of size, what is it worth now? And it's how we would think about £9,000.
wow.
It was a lot of money. I mean, that must have it did clear them out. And it certainly had some bearing upon what they did next, because obviously she marries her leading man, Johnny Gilbertson. And they
And
have
there's
to,
a cute story in the press about how they used the income from that film for their marriage, but then she didn't make money from that film, did she? Because Zenny Films folded after that.
no, no, they folded. I mean, I think they obviously sold it on to some, as a, the, they sold it on to somebody else, but Jenny never made any money from that. So there isn't really, I don't think she ever got her £100 back. It certainly was widely shown. I mean, it's an interesting question though, that, if Zenny Films hadn't gone bust and it had actually been a commercial success, what would that have looked like and what would that have meant?
I mean, I
So,
think it was a big success because it was shown for 5 years. And I remember when I was doing newspaper research, of just thinking the film was shown over and over again. And so it
I'm
was
thinking more of
successful.
her like successes in terms of she gets the credit, she becomes this filmmaker who's got, I mean,
Yeah.
got a blockbuster. I mean, what would have happened to Jenny if
Yeah. If that
things? things that kind of very much drew to a long pause with Jenny after.
because she'd stopped filmmaking and then got back into it later in life. But I think back to the bringing it in the soundtrack. I mean, it is, and it did receive some criticism, the sound version. It was very popular, but it did receive some criticism for being this kind of very didactic, domineering voiceover that explained, that kind of interpreted the
Right.
film for you. Um, and actually, a lot of films that John Grierson, who supported, who's for those that aren't familiar with Grierson, it's sometimes referred to as the father of documentary or the founder of British documentary movement. But sometimes his films are criticized. Some of the films that he made and produced are criticized for that kind of commentary. Zenny films is, but their other films have been criticized for that as well. But something I was thinking about today when I was just looking through things in advance of this was um, some of the reviews refer to her as amateur. And this is something that has come up again and again in relation to early women filmmakers in Scotland, that it was something which you could do if you had some money, that you had to do it kind of independently. And often, sometimes you would have like the Grierson sisters, um, a lot of their work was uncredited, but you know, they were able to make films in relation to their brother, John Grierson. Um, Margaret Tate worked as a medical doctor, so it was something that you were able to do um, with funding. But um, I was thinking about this because I did come across a few reviews of referring to Jenny Gilbertson as amateur. I think that the Orkney Herald piece said um, she was a film enthusiast, so not a filmmaker, so not a kind of a professional filmmaker. But I think for that period, um, having a soundtrack made it more of a respectable, serious film. That using the new technology would give it more kudos in a sense. Um, so yeah, that's something that occurred to me.
The making of the film is quite it's quite when you consider that and you consider the making of the film, because it's not like any other drama that was made at that time, is it? It's not like any other fictional piece of filmmaking. It's
No, it's
it's
quite incredible.
entirely in her. She'd already made in 31 she'd made a Crofter's Life in Shetland. In 32 she'd made those 6 films for John Grierson's General Post Office Film Unit, the 6 short films. So she was quite well rooted already within her filmmaking in Shetland. Um, and she was in what's really remarkable. I mean, just I watched it last night again. I haven't actually seen it for about 2 years. And it's just incredibly beautiful, but such a natural beauty. And the performances, there's only one professional actress in there, Inga, who's obviously the love interest, but the other all the other players are Jenny's friends. They're locals from Healer and Hillswick. They're Johnny Gilbertson, her friend, and she goes on to marry. His family, his sister Maggie, his mum and his dad. The Clarks, who she films all her early films with, they playing Inga's family. But the performances are just so beautifully understated. Um,
Yes. And also something that popped into my head when I was watching it again was, well, one, I love how the credits include the animals as well,
yeah.
and the significance of the animals. And it made me think of Margaret Tate's term, stalking the image,
Mm.
which she borrowed from the poet Lorca. And it was this idea she wanted to approach filming with, with a way of looking at everything within the frame, she said, with equal intensity.
Mhm.
So I think it was something like an apple is no less intense than the sea, a bee is no less important than the forest. So the way that you could treat everything equally. And I feel like there is a way, like with Jenny Gilbertson's filming, it's like the drama, what John Grierson had suggested, that it just be this thread going through the film, that it doesn't overpower everything, that you're still able to observe all of this really beautiful
Mhm.
detail.
Mhm.
Um, so like even the uh, within the croft, or yeah, the way that the camera kind of hovers above the table and
Mhm.
you see everything, how it's laid out, that there's something really visual. I mean, it's visually stunning, and being
Mhm.
able to see, taking time to see the way everyone is eating as well, what
Mhm.
they're eating. Um, so it is this kind of stunning approach to uh, cinematography.
Um, with the non-human, because she takes such delight in them. I mean, she's taking delight in so much that and you can really feel that delight through the camera, the way that she lingers on Lorna the dog, yapping, like preparing to get a little message put in her collar, and the caddy lamb, and even like when Johnny's dad is taking the pilticks and cutting them up and putting them on the stick so they
Love
can
that.
dry
Yeah.
them, and it's a fantastic show. But it's that just that like the way that she lovingly lingers with the camera over these small aspects of life.
And you kind of retrace Jenny Gilbertson's steps, her filming that she did later in life in Grease Fjord and in Arctic Canada. And do you think that that's something that stayed with her? That kind
Well,
of,
I think really it was that time that she spent filming in Shetland, in Healer and Hillswick, that prepared her for being able to film in the Arctic, and live in a community and film a community.
Mm.
Um, and it's just that delighting in being with people, and delighting with all the little humors, and the lightness, and just the moments of familiarity, and also just it's something that you wrote about just that really getting into the rhythm of the environment, and of the families and of the communities.
But she had been going there for years on summer holidays. So
Yeah.
they knew.
She
They
felt it. Yeah.
Yeah. So even though John Grierson said, well, made that suggestion, I wonder how then it developed, how the project developed, because obviously John Gilbertson played, if you see in the credits, he's there as really set design is what
Mm.
he's doing, that it was an old croft that had been abandoned and he kind of rebuilt it.
Yes, he fitted it all out inside, put a roof on it. He put a roof on it that actually it was Helen Thompson, Jenny's oldest daughter, who sadly died last year. We had a wonderful day at the beginning of my PhD when we went up to Healer, and she showed me all around our folks, various their folks' houses, and she took me down to Timna, which was the croft house that was used. Actually, there's a shot of I went there later on with Joanne Jameson, who is one of the first people to write about Jenny Gilbertson. She's a Shetland scholar, and Jenny Brownrigg, who has also written about Jenny Gilbertson. She's from Glasgow School of Art. So we went together one day, and there's this wonderful shot of them sitting just next to the croft house. And Johnny had actually he built a roof that you could take off the croft, so that you could actually film inside it, because there wasn't enough light. And actually, there are some.
So you
It's
can
only
see
when you
sometimes.
there's
Yeah.
some really interesting kind of angles of light, and there's the kind of the kind of the wind moving
Well,
the mantle shell.
yeah.
So there's so it was quite ingenious. I mean, because they had so little tech. They had a camera. They didn't have the huge amounts of technology that was being used elsewhere. And but in a way, that's probably a good. I mean, this is probably a film of its time. You could, if you had brought all that technology in, how would they have responded to the camera? How would they have been? The fact that Jenny could quietly move around them and film them means that we're getting them at their most natural.
Mhm. The other thing in terms of collaboration that I noticed was um, the other credit in the script as well. So, which I was going to ask you if you knew who that was at all. I don't know. It's Aileen Gordon.
No, I've heard the
No.
name as it appears. It's in the archive, but it's nothing. I never really studied Rugged Island. I
Mm,
very much looked at Jenny's own later work.
mm,
So I don't really know very much
mm.
about
It would
about
be interesting to
yeah.
know, but clearly collaboration was important
But
in the way you've written about that in your
yeah, she wrote about this John Grierson and Fordyce Hardy.
the Forsyth Party. Yeah.
Yeah, he was the editor of Cinema Quarterly at the time, which was the kind of big cinema periodical. So she writes a little piece on Rugged Island about that, and she clearly calls it a collaboration. She sees it as them all coming together and working together to create this film. Um,
So I find that an interesting tension as well in the way that she's written about, at that time, and also how we write about, I guess, women filmmakers as pioneers and using that kind of terminology, which I don't know how productive it is. And I mean, Jenny Gilbertson is written about as this lone filmmaker. Like that's the terms that are used sometimes. And yet collaboration was really important. And during the tour that they did with the film, John Gilbertson went with her. And some of the reports in the press, it's, you know, they're presenting the film together as the film that they made,
mhm,
um, which, yeah, I thought was really interesting that, because later in life, that was still something really important is the kind of working, um, with the people become part of the production team
mhm.
community.
Certainly in the Arctic, they all talk about playing a real role in the recording of the sound, in the whole making sure you got things right. And so it wasn't her just coming out with the camera and filming people. It was, how are we going to do it? How do we get to there? What do we need to bring with us? So it was all, it was definitely there was and also a shared excitement about it.
And she also, I wonder how important her connections with friends in London were, because I know that she had offers for support with some of her editing
Mhm,
in London, and John Grierson would later offer the use of
mhm,
his facilities as well. So there was that support too.
mhm.
Um, yeah, which is again goes away from, it's not something that can be achieved entirely on your own. Um, and do you know much about, you said a bit about how she did pay for the filming of them, or how she supported her film production?
And I know that she had this small amount of money from her uncle, which basically kind of kept it kind of certainly got her to Shetland, helped her to film those. She could also, but she also lived very, very, very frugally. I mean, this is something that continued all through her life. So the money that she had, she spent it on doing what she wanted to do. So she she just kind of cut her cloth accordingly. She lived with Femi and Johnny at the Crofter Healer, or would camp in their garden. She did what she had to do to be able to make the money spin out. But um, certainly spending that amount of money on the soundtrack, it does seem like it cleared her out. And that, at that time also, it wasn't long after that then war started. Johnny went to war. They had to find a way to sustain themselves in the filmmaking. It was all money going out rather than coming in. So, um,
And I guess, as well, that she would have gotten money maybe from the lecture tour as well.
I think she did. I'm not entirely sure how lucrative the lecture tour
Yeah.
was.
But she
Um,
was invited to show the film. She did a tour over, on was it 1934 to 1935
yes,
in
yeah,
Canada as well.
yeah. And in the 1935, she obviously hooked up with Evelyn cherry or predominantly ever and spice, and they made a film of which Johnny Gilbertson was the cameraman. So and that was a connection that she'd made through Grierson in London. So she was really good at making networks and making kin actually, and making people, finding people and befriending people, and then seizing the moment and doing things with people.
And she was quite incredible and inventive with the ways in which she filmed things as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was thinking of, I wonder, because I remember reading about how she would build a pyramid of stones
Mm-hmm.
and have them like 4 feet away from where birds were nesting or where they were perched. And then she would stand 20 feet away or 15 feet away and connect a string.
Mm-hmm.
So that then when the birds approached, came near, she could pull the string to start filming, which I thought when I was watching The Rugged Island this time at the start with the birds that were just like coming.
It's
It's
just
just
beginning. It's just
but I thought, I wonder if that's because how do you get that? And there's so many scenes in it that it almost thought, is that a drone? How did she kind of get this aerial shot? But I guess it's strategic points on flip tops
Mhm.
that she's
I just
able.
think she's just spent a lot of time. She really took her time learning all about the kind of terrain that she was moving around in, how things were, the changing of the light as the day. I think she kind of just really spent her time learning about a place and watching a place and understanding it. And that's what she did with people as well.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and that does come across in film that you do get kind of a real sense, the experience of everyday life, well,
Mm.
people that she's
Mhm.
filmed.
Her granddaughter, the granddaughters Rolis and Heather, who I met when I was out in Canada. I actually went to school with them, so I met them again when I was out in the Arctic and coming back from the Arctic. And they both said they just do not know how Jenny managed to get busy crofters to actually take part in in the making of a whole film. I
Well,
mean,
I've read as well because it was a set essentially. So like the chickens, apparently that all of that was brought up each day for filming. I don't know how many days the
yeah,
film took, and then they would take them back. So it was kind of put
yeah,
together. It wasn't just
yeah,
something that was there. So it would have required a lot of work.
yeah.
Um,
Well, I think actually, if I did actually look at it when I was watching it last night. I did actually look at see actually how many scenes are Johnny's parents and are Femi and Tina and Johnny Clark in. And actually, I can see that she probably was quite economical in the way that she used their time because they were busy. They had their own crofts, they had their own peak to cut, they had their own tatties to delve. They had, there was an endless amount of things for they to be doing this. They were just stepping out for a moment to make these films. So I think she was quite careful in how she used them.
but she never made another narrative film
Hmm.
again.
Hmm.
Um, and I guess, like you said, it would have been interesting to see what it would have been like had she done so. Which makes me think about again, I guess the, I mean, it is quite a kind of exceptional film for that period of having a story through it. And in Scotland, from like the 30s to the 70s, it was kind of predominantly documentary production. So the fact that was a narrative film, um, yeah, what was quite exceptional. And I did see her in one of the newspaper features about her. She does refer to herself, she identifies herself as the first woman in Scotland to make a kind of narrative film.
Mm.
Um, and I mean, I think that's why sometimes I kind of think, and I think these kind of assertions are difficult to make, and it's how you look at it. And Margaret Tate, who I've written about and researched a lot, is often referred to as the first Scottish woman to direct feature-length film, and that was in 1992 with Blue Black Permanent. But there are other people like Leslie Keane who directed an animated feature And then I would say you could even say Jenny Gilbertson with The Rugged Island, because it's for a film of that period. Um, that's quite atypical. Films of the period were much shorter. So that's a kind of, you could look at that as a narrative feature film. So you could identify her as the first um, Scottish woman to direct a feature film. But what do you think of her legacy, the archive and what's preserved and how her work's been presented? Well, you curated the program Real Illuminators, which drew from the John Grierson phrase of calling Jenny Gilbertson a real illuminator. Yeah, how do you think the way her work has been looked at, or the way it's um, perceived, has changed, do you think?
I know that whenever I show our films, either on mainland Scotland, I showed them in Canada as well, but in mainland Scotland and in Shetland, people love old films anyway. But
Mm.
there's just there's a people can't quite believe that they exist and that she did what she did and she did it at that time. And the more you kind of chat about it and speak about it, the more almost that they become more excited about her. I think actually she's still not known enough. I don't feel that she's appreciated enough by um I think this is why something like Hip Fest showing this and creating this,
Opening film.
you know, yeah, opening
Yeah.
film and this new opportunity to hear it and to see it. You know, it's an incredibly beautiful film, just so beautifully poised as well in terms of the performances. Um, I love it when people see it, and I love it when people can connect to it, because obviously up here there's lots of connections to that those kind of crofting life, the Paris, the place. So there's when you're in a room and people are connecting to it, it's a magical thing. But
I mean, it's take on a new life too.
yeah,
It's exciting to see what might happen with
yeah,
the Explorer if it ends up touring. But I guess I always think that these things can come in waves, that people kind of make discoveries and they remember, but then they forget again. And one of the things, I guess, when and it's important that the work is, the archive is absolutely, well, yeah, essential in, um, it's, yeah, fundamental to have the work kind of preserved. Yeah, the work has been shown, and I guess it's important just to keep, to make sure it doesn't slip away again.
mm,
So yeah, that's why something like this festival and kind of having a new score created as well is really important. The there's that photograph of Jenny Gilbertson in the lace dress, and I think it was at um it's part of Glasgow City's collection. So at the um which it's held at the Borough Collection that I visited there. I think I was with Jenny.
Brit, I was with you.
You were okay.
Yeah, that no, it is the same dress.
Yeah.
We found that photograph just after we saw it. We found the dress, so we went to see the dress.
I can't.
I was then went up to Shetland. I found these photographs, so that is the dress.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's interesting is the way in which these things are kind of tucked away in different archives and collections. And the other item I remember stumbling across was her 16 millimeter camera. And I don't know if that's the original one that eventually she went to 35 millimeter.
Mhm.
That that's at Scotland's Museum
Yeah.
of Industrial Life in Summerlee.
Yeah.
But there are all of these kind of collections. Um,
Those little bits.
yeah, which I guess maybe that's a project in itself, but connecting up the different archives. And Isabelle Saint-Louis,
Yeah.
Uh, she's done work on Ruby and Mary and Grierson, creating a website to kind of link together all of the different resources in the same way that the Women Film Pioneers Project. But, but yeah, I like seeing that photograph.
Of all the photographs, I really love that is her school report that she's done.
Yeah, what is that?
It's in her family. It's in their family collection. And it's basically that she had to report how well she's doing in school by stitching her marks. And I thought that's just another age altogether.
Yeah, very analog.
Yeah. The photographs of her certificate for her cookery course that she did. I'm so glad that that did not, go anywhere. I mean, apparently she did buy a saucepan when she was in Shetland, and occasionally she used to heat things up. But she sees her own. She sees her own. She took to hold her own future and made her own life, and it wasn't anything to do with domestic science. So.
Yes. Well, I think we probably could wrap it up now, but I just wanted to say thanks to Ali and thanks to Christina for hosting it and for inviting us. And thanks, Shona. It's really good to get to talk to you.
Okay.
Hopefully we can meet in person, maybe at the Hippodrome
Yes.
for the
Yeah.
premiere.
Yeah.
But thanks everyone for listening as well.
Thank you, Sarah.
Bye.
Bye.
So thank you so much to Sarah and Shona for including us in your really intimate, interesting conversation and for whetting our appetites for the screening that we're having of The Rugged Island. And I'm so grateful to you for really putting into words exactly how what my emotional response was to the film. That just Jenny's eye for detail, her compassion for her subjects, including, as you say, for even the animals, and just her sort of empathetic touch that she had, and the way she just went, "You're right, Shona. It's just very, very beautiful." And yeah, I'm just so glad that you've shared that insight with everybody. And it seems like such a loss, doesn't it? That the money really prevented her from making even more work and maybe another narrative film. Who knows what that would have been like? And I really also think it's a point well made and worth repeating about the debt that we owe to the archivists and researchers, not least yourselves, for for preserving films and for bringing the filmmakers behind them, the people behind them, into people's consciousnesses, and for protecting the very physicality of the material, rescuing these things from hen housings, like you say. And I'm really glad as well to say that, as you mentioned about Janet McBain, who was indeed the founder of the Scottish Screen Archive, she's going to be attending the premiere on our opening night, and she's going to be introducing and saying a few words. So it'll be really great for her to see that full circle happening and sharing it again with the whole new generation of audiences. And I also wanted to say to both of you, thank you so much for raising really interesting questions about the tropes and narratives around women filmmakers that maybe we get into quite lazily without even thinking about it. And also the tantalizing discussion around amateur filmmaking and what that means. We barely scratched the surface when we looked at films from the Institute of Amateur Cinematographers in our 2022 program. And I'd love the chance to revisit that. There's lots to discuss and enjoy. And like you say very much, Sarah, we hope that we can raise sufficient funds to tour this Rugged Island with the new musical accompaniment by Inga Thompson and Katrina MacDonald. So watch this space. We'll see if we can make it happen. Yes, just thank you so much for helping us really appreciate the treasures that we have in store. And lastly, thank you to all of you watching at home. Thank you for joining us. This conversation is going to remain on the Falkirk Council Leisure and Culture YouTube channel in our Hipfest at Home playlist. where you can rewatch at your leisure, and you can tell your friends to do the same. And I hope you will join us again soon for our next edition of HipFest at Home, featuring the curator of silent film at the British Film Institute National Archive, Bryony Dixon, and that will premiere on the 6th of March. See you soon.